for that where he plays.
Oh yeah, and then he didn't even come out. Like his tattoos didn't even come out in the scene.
He's like in it for like 10 minutes or whatever. Yeah.
Poor Shia LaBeouf, or not poor. Just I've heard he's like he beats women, but he's an amazing actor.
Yeah.
It's crazy that you can like with cancel culture, like it's hard to separate the art from the artist.
Yeah, well,
is it like for you?
Morrissey.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
You know, like I love the Smiths, but like Morrissey's very problematic.
He's problematic. So, that is a good word for it. I like to start with like conversation.
Yeah.
So that way it like comes out organically.
I went back and I mean, because the first time I ever heard you was when you did the one with Gil.
Yeah. And, shout out Gil.
Yeah, and then after that, I've heard like the last like 3 or 4 episodes. So you've got like when you were with Gil, you're like, oh, I hope I get better. It's like you've gotten a lot.
Oh, thank you so much. I really need to hear that today. Yeah, I keep trying to get better every time. It's tough, and
I mean that's all you can do is just as long as you're a little better than the last time, like
that is all you can do. Yeah. Do you struggle with like talking on the camera? Do you struggle with any of that?
I do a lot. Like my wife is like my like Hugh Howser, like he had a Louis.
Yeah.
And so my wife's my Louis, and but she's always like, dude, like you're overthinking it, because I usually try to write the things out that I'm gonna say.
Yeah.
And then I get so caught up in trying to say like the things like word for word, and she's just like, dude, just give me the gist of it. She's like nobody's gonna know that you didn't say the line.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
That's
she's
true.
Like, so just say it. She's
just
like, just pretend that you're talking to me. And so I try to do that, but yeah, I struggle with trying to like not get so caught up in like the little details when it's like, who cares if I say there instead of they are, kind of thing. But in my head, because I wrote it a certain way, I'm like, I'm trying to say it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel that. I've written things on cards, and then I'll be like, this is how I want to say it.
Yeah.
And then I don't end up saying anything to that, like anything on the card, because my brain also doesn't, I don't know. Sometimes I think my brain is just like going too fast, and it's just like a lot is going on in my mind, that when I'm speaking and I want to get to the point, I get like kind of too excited. So then I just say the simplest words that I can in order to like express that thought.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
I get that. Yeah, totally.
Okay. So now we can start.
Sure.
Can you introduce yourself, please?
So I am your history homie, Foo Howser, aka Javier Servin.
What do you like to focus on in your history?
So
like, or your, I don't know. You know what I mean?
Sure. No. Yeah. So I am a big fan of Hugh Howser, and I grew up watching him as a kid with my dad, and then during the pandemic, everybody was trying to find something to do.
Yeah.
And I stumbled on a video of his on YouTube, and I was like, oh man, I kind of want to go back and watch all his shows.
Yeah.
And that's how I found out that like Chapman University has everything online.
Uh-huh.
And I literally watched every single episode of every single show.
That's so cool.
Yeah. It took me a few months, but I did it.
Can you explain who he was?
Yeah. Hugh Howser was this journalist from Tennessee. He used to do these, he started off doing these things called video logs. They were like short, like 10-minute videos in between like the public television, KCET, our local station here, the public broadcast station. And he would basically go to different places in California and do videos on these people and places. And then, that evolved into California's Gold, and then visiting with Hugh Howser and road trip with Hugh Howser and California's Golden Parks and all these other kind of things. But his focus was California and like highlighting the people and places, in California. And it wasn't just necessarily history. It was like, he would go to like, there was an episode he did where, he visited like the Carmelita Chorizo factory in East LA, and he learned about their baseball team and how they make their chorizo and all that kind of stuff. And then, he went to like Langer's Deli and learned how they make their sandwiches there. And then, there's episodes where he goes to like the LA County Fair. So he's just all over the place. And then one of my favorite ones is like an obscure one is like, there was a lady that used to make artwork with dryer lint.
Oh my God.
And
that's fascinating.
And that was actually like, I think if I remember correctly, that was his first video log. So he did like a 10-minute thing on her. And then he went back and visited her again. And it was like 30 minutes of him just talking to this lady about dryer lint and her artwork. And he made it like interesting because he was so like enthusiastic about what people were talking about.
Yeah.
You know? And so that's why I think that's why people loved him so much, because he was so like genuinely like interested in what they were saying. Yeah.
He's like similar to like Anthony Bourdain in a way.
In that sense, yeah. Because like Anthony Bourdain, and that's somebody else that I really admire too. Is that he took the time to like talk to people and ask questions. Like every time he asked somebody a question, it was like very thoughtful, and he respected like people's cultures, and he knew that he was just a visitor there. Yeah. So that's why I really liked Anthony Bourdain. Yeah, like Huel too. Like he would ask like really like like everything was amazing. It was like he would
say,
like,
"That's great.
That's amazing." I remember there's an episode where he goes to a farm and there's a dog eating an avocado, and he can't get over the fact that this dog is eating. And so every like few minutes, he's like, "Is that dog eating an avocado? Oh my goodness, I have." And he's like talking about it, and then he goes back to doing whatever. Yeah. And then he's like, "Louie, look at that dog's doing." He's like, he goes back to it. He just can't believe that there's this dog eating avocados. You know? So, but yeah, he was genuinely like somebody who was trying to like, he used to say that his show had like two main purposes. Like one was to like show you things, right? So I'm showing you the Golden Gate Bridge. I'm showing you this and that. But the other part of it was him wanting to encourage you to go out and explore California on your own, like discover that California's gold is in like your own little neighborhood or your backyard, Yeah. So that's what I'm trying to do is that I'm not trying to be Hill Hauser because, he was the GOAT and, he can't be replaced. But what I'm trying to do is like in the spirit of Hill Hauser and just, trying to get people excited about like California history. So I go to different places. I, tell the history of the place. I try to find some historical, pictures and stuff. But everything that I cover is something that is tangible. So you can see it, you can smell it, you can taste it, you can hear it. Because I feel like when you talk about history, it's very like abstract sometimes when people are like, I don't care, that thing happened such a long time ago. But when you can actually say, hey, like, you see this building that's right here? It used to be this, and then it was this and that and that. Or, hey, did you know that like, this sandwich, has a history that goes back, 60 years and it was, created by this person this way, like that kind of stuff makes like that connection between the past and the present. I feel kind of makes people like care about history a little bit more. Yeah.
And I feel like now we live in such a fast paced type of lifestyle that when you don't take the time to care or to know the back end story of things, it's easy just to brush off and to be a dick to somebody, right?
Yeah, no, and then also like just like things like historic buildings. A lot of stuff is getting just torn down.
Yeah,
and you're kind of like, oh well, I don't care. Like I'm gonna build this here, and it's like, wait, like that building has significance to the community. Yeah. This and this happened here, or like you said, yeah, you're so quick to like, just kind of act before you kind of reflect on something,
right?
That you're kind of sort of like you don't know, like you said, like trying like being a jerk to somebody. It's like, oh, if you don't take the time to sort of like understand like the context of certain things, you can kind of say something that you might regret later, kind of thing, or tear a building down that had significance to the people. But if you're not from the neighborhood or that city or wherever, and you don't know the significance of it, you can start tearing something down, and you're like, dude, like. What are you doing? So, yeah.
Have you, in history, so I don't think we were recording when you were saying this, but you said you went back to school. Yeah. Can you tell the story of how you went back to school and why?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I originally, wanted to be a nurse when I got into college. And then I was like, oh, you know what? I kind of want to do like something in the medical field. And so I switched to being an EMT. So I like went to school to be an EMT. And my plan was to become a paramedic and then eventually go back to school. But then my dad, those two things that happened. One, I got hurt on the job. So I had to like, I got a hernia and I had to like get surgery. So I was out of work for a bit, and it worked out because I got to spend that time with my dad and not knowing that, he was going to pass away. So, before he passed away, I mean, he got to see me graduate, from high school and stuff, but he never got the chance to see me graduate from, like with a bachelor's degree. I think he did make it to when I became an EMT. he went to my graduation. So at least he got to see me get my AA.
Yeah.
But he always wanted me to like go and finish school. So when he passed away, that was a thing for me to be like, you know what, I need to go back to school. So I went back to Cerritos College, the classes for my transfer, and then I ended up going to UC Merced in Central California.
Okay.
And I absolutely loved it there. It was great. And my focus was world history, but my thesis was on California history. So I kind of like found a loophole because I was like, oh, I'm going to do my paper on California while it was still under Spanish rule. So technically it's world history, not American history.
Okay.
So my thesis was on this indigenous leader. His name was Cucunuchi.
If you don't mind me asking, what's your background?
I'm Mexican.
Okay.
Yeah, I was born in Mexico. I tell people I have the scar. I got the vaccine scar to prove
okay.
it. I'm from, my family's from Michoacan.
Okay.
Yeah. But they brought me here when I was like 6 or 7 months old. So
Okay.
I was raised here.
Yeah, it's like my parents. They were born in Mexico, and my dad came as a baby, and my mom came as like a 10-year-old child.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. No. So I was, raised, here.
Okay.
But,
sorry,
no.
your thesis.
Yeah, no. So it was on this indigenous leader. And so he because there's a county and a river up there named Stanislaus. And that's how kind of things work with me. I'm always kind of like, why is that called that? Or why is this thing there?
Yeah.
So I was like, what's Stanislaus? So I started looking into it. And that's when I found out about, because when he got baptized, they gave him the name Stanislaus. There's a saint, there's like a Polish saint.
Uh-huh.
And so he, in Spanish, it's Stanislao. And so he led a rebellion against the Padres in Mission San Jose. And he was like this incredible, like, military leader, like tactician. Like he was doing like trench warfare, before anybody knew what trench warfare was. So that's how I ended up doing that. And then I went to UCLA and I got a master's in archive studies. So now I work in an archive. But all throughout this stuff, I've always like been fascinated with history.
Yeah.
And, every time I drive somewhere with my wife, I'm like, hey, did you know that this is this or that? And so she's the one that got me to like, she would tell me like, don't tell me. Like, she's like,
yeah.
She's like, tell like, you should do this.
Have an audience.
And she was the one that got me onto like TikTok. Cause I used to be like, oh, TikTok's like, dancing and, whatever. And so she showed me that. And then that's when I was like, okay, I think I kind of, can kind of do this. And so I started going to different places with her and recording, but I didn't know what I was doing. So I spent like 6 months filming stuff that I couldn't use because I was just, like, I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
But then finally I was like, I just got to put one out, and I put one video out, and then that's how I kind of got the ball rolling,
That's how it starts.
Yeah.
You kind of just get better from there, right?
Yep.
Yeah. When you were in history, did they ever touch on the topic of gentrification at all? Like,
no,
okay.
no. Like the the first time that I actually heard the word gentrification, I think, I might have been listening to like NPR or something, and I was like, oh, what is that? And then when they started explaining it, I was like, oh, okay, that, because I grew up in, like I said, I grew up in Huntington Park, but I used to go to Boyle Heights a lot with my dad because he used to have his doctor's appointments at White Memorial. So I kind of feel like I got to see like Boyle Heights, and then going back a few years later and be like, oh man, like, yeah, this wasn't here before. Yeah, right. That wasn't here before, especially like Mariachi Plaza. Like that place has changed like a lot, in the last few years. So, yeah, it's one of those things where it's kind of like, it's unfortunate because people get pushed out, but the on the flip, some people are like, oh, well, there's a nice coffee shop, there's a nice this, there's a nice that, but it's like, yeah, but like the corner store is not there anymore that a lot of people used to rely on, or, people that were there for decades have been pushed out because unfortunately they weren't homeowners, because obviously if you're a homeowner, the gentrification benefits you because your housing, your value goes up, and, you could, sell and make money off and, go somewhere else if you choose to do that. Right. But if you're a renter, it's a lot harder because then, when the yoga, studios and whatever start coming in, sort of it changes the makeup and like the culture of the neighborhood. But it also like, the landlords see that and they're like, oh, I can raise the rent now, Right. And so,
they take advantage.
And then people get pushed out. And so, and then, but people are, oh, well, there's less crime and there's less this and there's that. But it's sort of like that push and pull, because it's sort of like, there's two sides to that thing, because I know some people are like, oh, well, it's great because now, I feel safe walking down the street, or
Right.
I do, whatever. But then it's like, yeah, but, like all the people that got pushed out, the businesses that used to be there, like, panaderias, now they're like, like I said, yoga shops or whatever. So yeah, it's one of those things where, it's unfortunate that it happens. I didn't realize that I thought the word gentrification was pretty new, but like they've been using it for like decades after I started looking into that.
Yeah.
And I think it comes from like the UK, like some researcher over there was the one that came up with that word. But yeah, then they were basically using it to describe that, like, people from working class neighborhoods getting pushed out by people moving from, from the city out into the suburbs because, they can't afford to live in the city center. So they're like, oh, let me move out to the neighborhoods. And then, it's like these white collar workers pushing out, the blue collar people that work there. So yeah. It's I mean, you're seeing it in a lot of neighborhoods. I mean, like here where we are in Silver Lake.
I know. I was just going to say that too.
Here in Silver Lake, Echo Park, Highland Park, it's happening. And, sort of like, I don't know what the solution is to that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's it's like it's super complicated to try to,
dissect all of it. Yeah,
exactly.
I agree. Yeah, I didn't know what gentrification was until I went to community college, probably like 2 years in after I graduated high school. And all I would see was what was happening in Highland Park.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to express like my curiosity, my frustration, like just like all these emotions of like what was happening, because it was like happening during that time. And I just like, I finally learned the word in one of my classes, and I was just like, that's what it is. Like, what? This is so wild. And I just related to it. And it seems like it just kind of kept being a word that I would hear like on a constant basis. Like, and I still to this day, and I obviously probably overuse that word too, but.
So now that we're, like what, because you're somebody that grew up in Highland Park.
Yeah.
Like, how do you feel about that? Like seeing, because like I would say where I grew up in Highland Park, that hasn't happened yet. I kind of feel like once, if the metro goes through there,
right.
That it's probably going to end up happening there because, there's like similar sort of like, they always say there's like certain signs that it's going to happen right there.
Starbucks.
Starbucks moves in and they put a metro station by, the city or whatever. I mean, Highland Park has a Highland Park station.
Right.
But how, like you having grown up there and seeing it, like, how do you feel about gentrification?
So it's been complicated. I like I said, I just struggle with communicating in my words. I feel like I didn't read enough as a child. And I feel like I struggled a lot with like these emotions that were like really complicated, because when I was growing up, like Highland Park was kind of scary. It wasn't a safe place. My parents didn't even want me to go to the schools around there, and they kind of made it apparent that it was not a safe place and I couldn't walk around, places by myself. So it was really complicated when I learned what the word was, because like you said, people say like, oh, well, now you can walk around and feel safe. And that is true. But now it's not the same Highland Park. And I know nothing ever is, but it's definitely not even close to anything. Like nobody respected the culture. Mm-hmm. Nobody respected the people that live in that community. And they kind of just invaded and took it as their own and kind of made it to this like circus. Yeah. I feel like it's a circus. Mm-hmm. It frustrates me if I'm being real. And it's like people move in and, like they complain about the carne asadas and the, that kind of stuff. And I mean, like where I grew up in HP, I mean, that was like normal, it's like,
you know, you're like, oh, they're having a carne asada. Cool. Maybe they'll invite us, you know, or whatever. Even in Paramount, where my wife and I lived after we got married, we lived there for 8 years. You know, same thing. It's like, you know, you just, you know, you're like, oh, it's the neighborhood, you know, that's how it is. Now where we live in Whittier, I feel like somebody might call the cops, you know? So it's just, you know, it's just that kind of thing where it's just like, you know, if you're coming into like the neighborhood, like you shouldn't try to, you know, like Rick said, respect the neighborhood, you know? And that's unfortunately when people move in to have money and, you know, they have whatever they want to be, oh no, get rid of those chickens. You know, get rid of the chickens, you know, in the backyard, or, you know, like stuff that I grew up with, you know, people, oh, you can't have that here, or the loud music, or the carne asadas on Saturday, you know, that kind of, it changes the, you know, the makeup, you know, of the neighborhood. And especially like, you know, I'm sure when you were growing up there, you had like your spot, you know, your panaderia, you know, and you knew the person there, they knew you by name, and, you know, you would walk by and buenas tardes, buenos dias, you know, whatever. So I'm sure that's all changed.
Yeah. So we used to go to Delicia's, which is still there, but I think they're going out of business. But it was wild to see, like, they sell like vegan shit all of a sudden. And it's like, to cater and to stay in business. I don't blame some of these people, like, you know, but it is to cater to the predominant people that are living in Highland Park now.
Well, actually, I because when you asked me to like talk a little about Highland Park, I started researching some kind of places, and I found about that. And actually, the reason why they switched that was because the daughter of the owners became vegan.
Okay.
So she became vegan and she missed pan dulce. And so her sister asked their panadero, and she's like, hey, you think you could try to make some vegan pan dulce?
Yeah.
And he was like, he's like, I think he was working for them for like 10 years or something, but he'd been a panadero for like 30 years.
Yeah.
And he was like, I don't know what vegan is.
Yeah.
Whatever. He's like, but I'll give it a shot.
Okay.
So he made like a batch of like conchas that were vegan. And after that, he started making some other stuff. So it's one of those things where it's like, it happened because, you know, one of their kids had become the younger generation, but then that sort of like helped them sort of like, you know, stay in business and sort of like, it's almost like 1 foot in tradition and like 1 foot in innovation kind of thing.
Right.
You know, and I mean, and they basically, I think if I remember correctly, it was like an LA Taco article. They said they were like the first like old school panaderia to offer like vegan stuff. So they were the first ones to do it in LA.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
So I was like, oh, that's cool. But I mean, I also read about like, I think it was Elsie's or Elsa's panaderia that was there for a long time. And that place is gone. Now it's like a hot pot, you know, noodle place or something like that. So yeah, you know, it's like things like that happen. It's like, you know, if you're, you know, like them adapting that, you know, for their daughter kind of sort of helped them kind of like stay there for a bit.
Yeah.
But
did you read that they're going out of business?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
No.
I think somebody told me that. I don't know if that's true. So I'm not going to claim anything.
Yeah, no, like, cause I mean, that article came out like 6 years ago, the one that I read from LA Taco. I think the most recent thing that I read when I was doing research was like 1 or 2 years.
Okay.
You know, but I mean, I checked on their Instagram and they were still posting.
Okay,
so, you
good.
know, I didn't see any.
I like to see the businesses that have, you know, still figured it out to stay there and to more or less stay true to like what they were initially doing.
Yeah.
You know? And I think when it comes to like time and just, you kind of have to go with like time and develop and
I mean, because that's the unfortunate thing. It's like if you don't evolve,
that's the word I'm looking for.
You know, or adapt. You know, you perish, kind of thing. You know, and so that's the thing is that, you know, unfortunately, a lot of these, because the clientele changes, and then also too, like us. I mean, you know, I always say I'm first generation, you know, Mexican. I don't have any kids, but I would imagine if I had kids, you know, their like attitude towards things is going to be the same as me. You know what I mean? So it's like where I grew up in HP, there's, you know, Pacific Boulevard. I don't know if you've ever been. It's just like quinceañera shop after quinceañera shop after quinceañera shop. And so the thing is like, do girls growing up now, do they care about a quinceañera? You know,
that's
like,
true.
You know, it's like, so, you know, that business that caters strictly to like quinceañeras, you know, are they going to have to adapt and change to something else, or are they even able going to be to adapt to, you know what I mean? So it's just this whole kind of like, you know, thing where it's just like, as time goes on, you know, like the interest of, you know, the kids, you know, changes. So, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, who knows if you can even adapt. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you, by any chance, get to look up the pizza place, Folliero's?
Is that the one that's right by the Chicken Boy statue?
Yeah.
I love that place.
Yeah, me too.
I
It's
went,
my favorite pizza.
I went there. I took there's an account that I follow called Merch Motel.
Okay.
And he does, I love his like reels and stuff. And he does like walking tours of certain places. And he did a walking tour of Highland Park. And so we went and, we did like Chicken Boy in the Highland Park Theater and the Highland Park Bowl, and, some of the other like historic buildings that are on Figueroa.
Yeah.
And then afterwards he was like, I'm like, any place you recommend for lunch? And he was like, you know what? I've never been there, but I've heard it's pretty good. So my wife and I were like, let's drop in there. And oh my God, that place was awesome. It was really good. And I think it's been there since like the 50s, if I remember correctly. Yeah, but it was really good.
My dad grew up in Highland Park. Both my parents grew up in Highland Park. They were actually next door neighbors. So they're really familiar with like the businesses. My dad loves this book. Yeah. He loves all these types of books. And we have a few copies at my parents' house. But yeah, he knows a lot about Highland Park, but sometimes I don't know if he's like telling the truth.
he's embellishing,
Yeah.
He's yeah.
So that's why I also wanted to just like hear your take, because I just like you, I'm sure you fact check and you actually like.
Yeah, no, that's the thing I try to do is that like, and that it's more like, it's like a double-sided sword kind of thing. Cause I know that if I like just read Wikipedia and then just regurgitated that out, I could like crank out videos like this.
Yeah.
But because I like to research, but two is like, I don't want to give people like wrong information. So I try to like double check things, and so, yeah, it takes a long time because then you get into like rabbit holes,
Yeah.
But yeah, I do try to like fact check it where I can, if I can find like newspaper articles or things like that to like, confirm, the date of something or the name or, that kind of stuff. Definitely.
Okay. So Folliero's, it was, they're Italian, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
I know the cooks are like Latinos.
Yeah,
They all speak Spanish.
That's like the best restaurants.
But they've been there for like years.
The best restaurants in LA have all like, there's always like Latinos in the kitchen. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny because before I knew what gentrification was, we were at Folliero's and the daughter of the owner started like showing her face. She was younger and like she just like kept coming around, and me and my family were like, oh, she keeps making all these changes to like what it used to be, and like we just didn't like it. And she was starting to put like art up in the store, and she started like, changing shit that we just didn't like.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause the thing is, you're used to like the place looking a certain way and feeling a certain way. And you're kind of like, hey man, like, that the decor sometimes of the places like what makes them, you know what I mean? And it's like, don't that dusty painting there. I love that dusty painting. Like, don't bring that thing down. Yeah, no, definitely. I get it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm glad they're still in business and they're still like cash only. Like they're standing by
old
it.
School. Yeah, no, that was the thing was we went there and I was like, we sat down, we ordered everything and I was like, oh, it's cash only. So I like run like 2 blocks to like the ATM to go get some cash.
Yeah.
Cause I never carry cash. Like I'm just, I always drop it. I always, whatever. So
Apple Pay.
Apple Pay, credit card, everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
For sure. So do you know the history of the Chicken Boy?
Yeah.
Okay.
So because you asked me to talk about Highland Park history, I started digging into stuff. So like I'm trying something different with my next video. Like on YouTube, I'm gonna try like a longer video where I'm gonna go like to a few spots.
Okay, cool.
And then on my social media, I'm gonna do like little bits of it or whatever. But so yeah, Chicken Boy is like pretty interesting. Like there was it was a restaurant called Chicken Boy Fried Chicken, and it was in downtown LA. It was like on Broadway between like 4th and 5th over by like the Grand Central Market. And there was this artist, her name is Amy Inoa, and she came to LA in the 70s. And one day she was down like shopping at Grand Central Market and she saw Chicken Boy and she like felt like an immediate connection to it. She was like I love this statue, like this thing is amazing. And so every time she would have people like visit from out of town or whatever, she would make it a point to like take them by Chicken Boy. She called it the Statue of Liberty of Los Angeles. And then one day she drove by and she saw a sign that said for lease at the Chicken Boy restaurant. And she was like, oh no, what's going to happen to Chicken Boy? So this was, I think it was 1984. And so she called like the leasing company and they were like, hey, if you want them, come and get them, but you need to like get them like soon. So she like found like some people with like a crane and stuff to like take them down. And so they took them off the roof of that restaurant. And then she thought because she was looking at it from the ground, she thought it was like 10 feet tall or something. It's like 22 feet tall or something. So they had to like dismantle it. So for a long time, his body was in one of her friend's backyard, like in Monterey Park or something. Yeah. And the head was in her studio. Okay. So she had the head in her studio. And then she was trying to convince like LACMA and all these other places to like take Chicken Boy. And cause she was like telling like, dude, like Chicken Boy is like the Statue of Liberty of LA. It's like, so this and that. And they're like, we don't care. So she ended up keeping the head in her studio, the body in her friend's backyard. And then sometime I think in like the early 90s, somebody from a radio station was like, oh, like we'll find a place for him. And they found this like parking garage downtown where they would let her put him up. So he was up there for a bit. They had a whole like Chicken Boy festival for him. There was even a Chicken Boy day, like it was like proclaimed or whatever.
What year was this?
I think it was like the mid 90s.
Okay.
And then after that, they were like, yeah, we can't keep him here forever. So she had to dismantle him again. And what she ended up doing was she made a catalog. And she would put ads and say, oh, send me $1, I'll send you this catalog. And the catalog had like Chicken Boy t-shirts, Chicken Boy keychains, Chicken Boy, all these kind of things. And she kind of went, like back in the day, before going viral, she like went viral like around the country because people kept doing these articles about Chicken Boy. And so finally in like, I think it was like 2000 and it was like in the 2010s, she found the space in Highland Park. And after going through like loops with the city and, all this stuff, because, all these permits and all these things, she finally got the okay to put Chicken Boy on the roof of her studio. So that's how Chicken Boy ended up in Highland Park.
So, okay. Cause I didn't even know that was a studio. I thought it was like a tax office or something. Somebody does taxes there, but it's a studio. No, because from the outside, it doesn't look like anything.
Yeah. It's like never open.
Yeah. So I like my whole life from being like conscious of just like my neighborhood. Cause like I said, when I was younger, my parents didn't let me really walk around or anything. I just noticed this random Chicken Boy, like it was so weird. And I was like, okay, I guess this is just part of the gentrification that's happening or whatever.
Yeah.
By any chance, I don't know if do you drive in Highland Park every now and then, or like?
I've been through a couple times. Yeah.
Do you ever get off on Avenue 52?
Yeah.
You know where, I'm blanking out right now. There's a street that goes all the way to Lincoln Heights. And there's this, before you get to Lincoln Heights, obviously it's still Highland Park. It's right by the freeway. There's like a bug. Somebody created a bug out of like trash cans and like just like recycled items. Yeah. You might want to check that out.
I'm gonna check it out.
And then you could like just find out more information about it. It's literally right when you exit off of 52. You make a right. There's a house there.
Okay.
And you'll see it. It's like a dragonfly made of just like,
that's cool.
It's huge.
Yeah.
It's I want to say it's like not too far from the size of Chicken Boy.
That's pretty big.
And it's just been there like for the longest time.
Yeah.
For years. I want to say over 10 years.
Wow.
So it's probably even more because I remember seeing it just like as a teenager. So I'm 31 now. I'm doing the math. That's like about 20 years.
No, I just turned 40 and it's like, it's, those things where people talk about stuff and they're like, oh, like the 90s. And then I'm like, oh, that was like 10 years ago. And I was like, no, it wasn't.
I know. When I do math, I'm just like, what?
Yeah, no, I've had some people online that will be like, oh, yeah, in the late 1900s. I'm like, hey, how dare you?
The late 1900s.
It was the 90s.
When you say that, I think of like puffy sleeves and like Renaissance.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what are you talking about late 1900s, man? It was the 90s. Like, yeah.
Damn, that's crazy. So what businesses did you learn about?
So I dug into Delicias for because I was trying to find like some old panaderias there, and like I said, I found out about, I think it was Elsie's or Elsa's that went out of business a few years ago.
Okay, there used to be like a couple like on Figueroa, from what I remember.
Yeah, and I think there's only like, at least at panaderias, there's like a Monarca there.
Yeah,
and then there's Delicias, and then I think there's another one called like El Águila or something like that, and then all the other like artisanal, other bakery
specialty.
Yeah. But because Chicken Boy's right across from Highland Park Bowl, I kind of like looked into that.
Mr. T's.
Mr. T's. Yeah. so I ended up finding out that like it was built in like 1927.
Okay.
And like right around like Prohibition. So they had doctor's offices upstairs where you can get a prescription for like whiskey. So you would go to the bowling alley and be like, oh, I got to go see the doctor, and go upstairs. And, oh yeah, you need whiskey for, whatever. And then you would go fill it, in the next office, and you'd get like, your legal whiskey during Prohibition.
Okay.
And then the business stayed as a bowling alley for a while. And then I think his name was Joe. I can't remember his last name. I always tell people I'm a terrible historian because I forget like years and names. But Mr. T he owned a liquor store called Mr. T's Liquor.
Okay.
And then he bought the Highland Park bowling alley.
Oh.
And then he turned it into Mr. T's. And then, after a bit, they got rid of the bowling alleys, and there was 2 lanes in the back that were like hidden, but he turned it into like a music venue. And then it was like a big thing like in the 80s and like 90s for like punk bands and people would go there. Yeah. And so after he passed away, I think his son tried to keep it going to like 2014, and then he sold it. And the group that bought it, I like what they do, because they try to like preserve the buildings, because mostly it's like, businesses that buy properties, they just tear them down. And so there's this group called the 1933 group, and they buy a lot of these like historic buildings, and they try to like restore them to what they used to be. So they went in there, they bought it, they took like the facade from the front down, so it has like the original entrance when it used to say Highland Park Bowl. That's like from the 20s.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And then they went and they like, they restored it to a bowling alley. And and I think they have a room they call it Mr. T's room. So like in honor of Mr. T. So, it's like one of those things where it's like, they're changing things, but they're also kind of sort of trying to keep it the same, what I mean? Because if not, if it would have been somebody else, they would have just torn it down and turned it into, some.
I mean, it's probably me being like, just like a pessimist about it, but something about it makes me feel like it's obnoxious to like keep the memory of it. Like, which is, I understand what you're saying. And it's also like, yeah, because if you don't preserve the memory of it, or like what it initially used to be, then that history is lost, or nobody can even find or even wonder, why is it called the Highland Park Bowl or Mr. T's room? You know, like somebody could Google that and then find out like what the history is of that, versus like just taking it away. Yeah,
no, because that's the thing is like, in LA especially, is just like, just tear things down. And just build something else new. And, a lot of the buildings that, like, I'm glad to build, like, my favorite building is the giant Tamal in East LA. Like, I love that building. And when I have to drive to work, I don't drive, I don't take the freeway because I get pissed on the freeway. So I just take the streets, and
so I go scenic view.
Yeah, exactly. And I drive down Whittier Boulevard. I'm like, there's a Tamal, I love that building, but it's from a bygone era. People are like, why are or Randy's Donuts or things that's the kind of stuff that I love. So I like seeing places that groups that are trying to like preserve things like that. So like that same group did. Have you ever heard of Tale of the Pup?
No.
So there's it's in West Hollywood now, but it used to be like over by Cedar Sinai before, and it was somewhere else before too. But it's like literally a giant hot dog that they used to sell hot dogs out of it.
Okay.
And so it got moved around for a bit, and then for a while it was at this museum in Van Nuys, and then this 1933 group said, "Oh, we want to restore it." So now they have the hot dog in front of the restaurant, and they sell like merchandise and stuff there, and then like the restaurant's behind it. But it's like they preserved the Tale of the Pup, which is like this old restaurant from like the 50s or 40s or whatever, and then there's a place in
something about that, it just feels like triggering. Like maybe it's triggering a memory. Maybe I have been there. I don't know.
I mean, if you've been there and you see it, you're gonna be like, oh yeah, absolutely. And there's a place also in the valley called Idle Hour. That's like it's shaped like whiskey barrels, and same thing. Like it was for a while. It was like deteriorated and whatever, and they brought it back to what it used to be like. So that's kind of cool that you get to sort of see these things how they used to be.
The signage and stuff. Exactly. Yeah. I guess when you say it like that, I guess it's okay. Because I remember I used to get so annoyed that there's this it's a deli. I don't even know what it's called, but it used to be my dad's liquor store, and it's a liquor store he used to go to. I think
I know what you're talking about.
And the sign says coldest beer in town.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
And it like irked me that they preserved like the sign,
but they changed.
it, and it's like a speakeasy deli, and you have to say a password to get to the deli, and that shit pisses me off.
No, I can totally understand that.
Yeah, so it's just like I don't know. So and then it made me sad to see. There's a little dairy. It's on Figueroa. It's before 52, but my dad would also go through there. It was like a drive-through like liquor store and a dairy. Yeah. And I don't know, it was an Asian family that owned it. And my dad would call her mama, and like that was just her name. And as a little girl, like I would call her mama, and like she'd say she had broken English and she really couldn't speak English, but she was always so sweet to me. And like my dad always like looked out for her because he said that one time they were gonna get robbed or something. I don't know. He helped her in some way, and it's just like that type of stuff is like neighborhood, community stuff, Yeah. And it sucks like that it's not like that anymore.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, yeah, because that's the thing is like when that character, that neighborhood of like people being regulars and like knowing each other and, being like, oh, I don't have any cash today. Oh, don't worry. You can give me tomorrow, kind of thing like that. Yeah. That doesn't happen, today. So yeah, that's the unfortunate things of the neighborhoods changing.
Yeah, for sure. And there's still a panaderia by Burbank Middle School. Their sign, I feel like it just says panaderia, but like I'm sure it's like on Google with the name and everything. But the owner's son, he's like, him and his family too, they're the type of people that still to this day are like, don't worry about it, just pay me when you get back.
Yeah.
Or like, and I love that because it's still like keeping like this community. Yeah. And, they've done that to me several times because like sometimes I won't freaking have cash.
Yeah.
And I just like, I'll make it a point to be like, no, I'm going to like go get cash and I'm going to pay them more what they like told me to pay because of that, because that matters to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm glad they're still in business too. But what other businesses? I'm getting on like tangents of things.
No, it's all good. I think the other place that I looked up was Galco's.
Oh, I love Galco's.
Yeah, so like Galco's, I didn't know that it was like the business was that old. It's from like 1897.
No way.
So basically, it started as an Italian grocery in what used to be Little Italy, which is like Chinatown now. So actually, no, it started. I like in like the Pico Robertson neighborhood for a few, and then they moved it to Chinatown or what used to be Little Italy.
Really?
And then in the 50s is when they moved it to Highland Park. And so it was an Italian grocery store, and they had a deli, so it would make like sandwiches and stuff like that. And then when their son took over when he was working there, and he looked like he was going to kind of take over the business. It was like in the 90s, and he said that a lot of the bigger chain stores were pushing like the smaller stores out. And the thing that made him like switch over to like sodas and like craft beer and stuff was because I think he said that like the Pepsi guy or something came and said, oh, I'll sell you this case of, we'll sell you the cases of Pepsi for like $3. And he was like, well, I'm just going to tell people to go to Ralph's. And the guy's like, why? He's like, because at Ralph's, they'll give them to him for $1. He's like, it's sort of thing of like the big sodas, because they're so big, they can like demand shelf space. And so he was like, I'm not going to do that. So he like started off with like just a handful of like sodas. And then his dad told him that he was nuts, for doing that. And eventually within a few years, it was like up to like 500. I think now they have like 700 different kinds of sodas. And then like, I don't know, like 200 some types of like craft beer and alcohol and whatever, but they still make the sandwiches. And
dude, those sandwiches are bomb.
Yeah. You know why they call them blockbusters?
Why?
So there was a boxing Italian boxer. His name was Rocky Marciano. Okay. And the story goes is that when they were in Chinatown, he dropped in because he couldn't get a table at a restaurant. So he's like, let me get a sandwich. And he took a bite. He's like, oh man, these things are real blockbusters. It's like a real blockbuster. It's like that good. So like, oh, we got to name it a Blockbuster after that. So that's why they call their sandwiches Blockbuster.
Interesting. Yeah. That's fascinating. I love Galco. I've been going there since I was a kid. My dad was on the news. They like were doing a, I don't know, segment at Galco's. And he's the type of person that you'd be like, oh shit, that's my friend on the news again. And that I just remember going there, eating the sandwiches. Those sandwiches are bomb. Something about the French bread is just like, it's amazing. Yeah. And then now you can make your own sodas there. Yeah, I saw that. I haven't tried it yet. I think when I go back to like film for the video, I think I'm gonna try and make a soda. But so the owner there, that's the son you're talking about. That's the son. Yeah, he's like I think his name is John Neese. Okay. But so like Foo Howser did a video on them because the daughter, talking about like kids kind of like trying to like change it. She reached out to like, she wrote a letter to like Foo Howser and was like, hey, you should come visit my dad's store, this and that. So he went, and when he went there, he told him, he's like, you better get ready because your business is gonna like change. And so he went there, and I think he went back like 10 years later, and they were like, yeah, you were right. It's just like instead of 2 shelves of sodas, like the whole store is now soda. We don't have groceries anymore. Yeah, because I guess at some point they still had like produce and milk and that kind of stuff. And then when Hugo came back, they had put in the candy, like the old school candy thing where the vegetables used to be and stuff. And so it's all candy from like the 50s. Yeah, it's something. all like I mean, there's some stuff that's, I mean, like Abba Zaba you can kind of find a lot of places, but I remember I went there. I think you still get candy cigarettes. Yeah. Which is like, you can't get that anywhere. There's like there's They're a illegal. Thing called, there's like a thing called like Idaho Spud. It's like it's named after potato. It's like a chocolate or whatever. And then, just all the sodas. Like I really love just grabbing random sodas and taking them home and trying them out and be like, oh yeah, this is pretty good. Yeah. I like trying their different ginger ales because I like ginger ale a lot. And they have like all types. Yeah, I know that when Huel went, he gave him one that was like super spicy, and he like took a swig of it and he's like, oh, that's good. That's not that bad. And then after a while he was like, oh, I'm sweating. Like it was hot. That's funny. Do you know anything about the like Checker Hall or the Lodge Room or anything, like the history behind that? So you talking about the Masonic Lodge? Yeah. Yeah. So I briefly like saw something on it. I think it was, if I remember correctly, it was built like in 1923. So it's like from the 20s because they had people that were in the Masons. Can you explain what that means? So I don't really know what it means. Okay. All I know is that so basically like the Masons are like this group. It's like a fraternal order kind of thing. And they have their own like traditions and like rituals and things like that they do. What the Masons are, whatever you watch, like, was it the Da Vinci Code and all these other things? It's like, it's always the Masons behind. It's like this conspiracy thing. Yeah. I don't really know too much about the Masons, but basically like, it was like a club fraternal order. There was a lot of people that were in that were part of the Masons there. And eventually they're like, hey, we need somewhere to meet. So that's when they like got the money together. They built the Masonic Temple. The second floor was where they had all their like the lodge and their meetings and things like that. And on the first floor they had like businesses and things like that. And then at some point I think it was in the 80s or 70s,
they consolidated that lodge with another lodge, and so they were like, we don't need the space anymore. So that's when they sold the building. So there's still like Masonic symbols, like, on the outside of it and inside, and there's I guess there's like a music venue now called the Lodge, because that's where they had their meetings and stuff like that. But yeah, like I'm not a Masons expert. All I know, it's sort of like, you ever watch The Simpsons, like the Stonecutter episode? I think that's sort of like what the Masons are, at least in my head.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I've never understood what the like Freemasons.
Yeah,
is.
it's like all I know is that like part of the thing of joining them is that you have to have like a belief in a higher being.
Okay.
Not necessarily like God, but just like a higher being. So they have, I mean, and it goes back like presidents or members of it. It's, it's this whole kind of like that's when you start seeing like the cult or the conspiracy theory kind of like things coming out. But supposedly they're Masons because it goes back to like people that used to like make bricks and things like that.
Okay. That explains why it's all brick.
Yeah.
Okay.
But then, from then on, it's just become this, there's Masons now. The only other thing I know about them is that like the Catholic Church is not like them.
Really?
So like if the Catholic Church has said that you can't be Catholic and be a Mason. That's all I know. So I was like, I don't know what they did to upset the Catholic Church, but so
there's just so much history. I think you should do a video about that, because honestly, like everyone just casually talks about the Freemason, like, oh, it was a Masonic lodge. What does that even mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what the fuck it means.
Yeah, no, I like I said, I've my understanding of them is like super like superficial. Like, I just know
like
just
surface level.
Yeah, yeah.
And I just know that like they preserve the checkered floors, and it's called Checkered Hall, and there's a meaning behind that. Something about, I don't even know.
Yeah, that's part of that whole like the symbolism.
Yeah.
Behind, like because they have like like I said, it's sort of like the stonecutters in the Simpsons, where they have like their own way of greeting each other. They have their like own rituals, their own kind of like, it's almost like being like a secret club kind of thing.
Illuminati.
Maybe some people say that it's Masons are the, I don't know. It's
I've heard that
conspiracy.
before too.
Yeah, so
So where are they now?
The Masons?
Yeah.
No, there's still lodges like, in places like the one that was in Highland Park. I think they moved to Pasadena.
Oh.
Or like, somewhere in that area. But even like
I think you're right.
Yeah. Even like where I grew up in Huntington Park, Downey still has a Masonic lodge. And I think they still have like, Mason meetings. I know I have a friend that I went to high school with that posts pictures of himself in his like regalia or whatever, like because they wear like aprons because of like the whole Mason thing. So I know one person that I went to high school with that's an active like Freemason.
What?
So yeah, but again,
is he a bad
like,
guy?
He wasn't a bad guy. It's just I haven't talked to him in like years. I just know that because he'll post occasionally about it, he was a cool dude when we went to high school, but I don't know now.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I'm so like fascinated by like, I mean, I didn't even know they existed. Like, I don't know what type of people these are.
No, I mean, even stuff that's a little less like nefarious, like the Elks Lodge or like, that kind of stuff, the Lions Club. I'm like, what is that? Like, I don't know. I know that they're like,
bunch of guys
of like, it's usually a bunch of, it might just be an excuse to like get together and drink, you know what I mean? Like it's just
solid.
It's like, it's like, like a bunch of guys are like, oh yeah, like I'm going to go to the Lions Club meeting. And then it's just being at a bar and just, whatever.
Yeah.
But back in, at least I feel like in like the 50s and 40s and that kind of era, there was a lot more of those like fraternal groups, like I said, like the Elks Lodge or the Lion Club or the Masons or what's the other one? They do the Shriners, like
what's that?
Like there's these they wear these little red hats and they drive like little tiny cars in the Rose Parade, or things like that, if I remember correctly. But yeah, it's the same thing where it's like these groups would do like charity events. So it's like, oh, the Shriners Club, like walkathon or the Lions Club this or pancake dinner or pancake breakfast or spaghetti dinner, that kind of stuff to like raise money for like schools or events. So they did a lot of like community like based thing, but it's just they had their own like names for their clubs, for whatever reason. Yeah.
That's interesting. I would like to know more about that. Do you recommend people stop by any places like in Highland Park, Northeast LA? Like,
I mean, for sure, the Lummis house.
Okay.
That's right there off the, by the Arroyo Seco. That house.
Yeah. What was the guy? His name was
Charles Lummis.
Charles Lummis.
Yeah. Like that place is awesome. Like cause he like built it out of like rocks from the Arroyo Seco.
I forgot the story behind that, but I know he was like a pretty like decent guy from what I've read.
Yeah, he was he
helped out a lot of minorities, right?
Yeah, well, I wanted, there was always criticism with the lens of like the present,
Right.
So people felt like he kind of sort of like that. It was like a weird relationship with like Native Americans. He like championed for their rights and for certain things. But some people felt that he was sort of like that. What's that word I'm looking for? Is basically like he was trying to promote like Native American museum and studies and things like that, but some people felt that he didn't go far enough, or it was just some weird kind of like criticism of how the way he handled that kind of thing.
Right.
But he's the reason why they started the Southwest Museum of the American Indian, which was right above Highland Park, which is closed now, and they're gonna sell it or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was a character. I think he like, if I remember correctly, he was going to get a job with the LA Times and he lived in Ohio and he decided to walk. So he walked like 143 days from Ohio to LA.
Why did he do that?
Because that's what he did. He was like a very eccentric kind of like dude.
I feel like he was like open-minded from what I'm remembering of what I read about him. He was open-minded for his time, like
absolutely, right? And then he also like used to like to party a lot too. Like he built that house and out of cement because he said it was easier to hose down after a party. So he used to have like like a lot of like things like that at his house, and now it's run by the city parks, LA city parks.
Okay.
Yeah. So I feel like it's open.
I thought it was Highland Park Trust. Yeah.
No. I mean, I don't know if they're involved in it and something, but for sure, because they used to be the headquarters for I think the Southern California Historical Society, and then they left sometime in the 90s.
Okay.
And then the city of LA took over. So now if you go, you'll see like the park rangers from LA. They'll say like LA City Parks or whatever.
Okay.
But the Highland Park Heritage must they have to be involved somehow in that. But yeah, the Lummis house is a really cool place to. What I would say is like start in the morning, go to Delicia's and get some breakfast
some
or
vegan conchas,
and then maybe like go to Galco's, grab some sodas and some blockbusters, and then head over to the Lummis house and enjoy the little sit under one of the trees and just have your blockbuster and your soda that you made. Make up your own soda at Galco's.
There's so much history in Highland Park.
Like, absolutely. Yeah, it goes back to from the indigenous people there all the way, through the Spanish period.
What museum is it? The houses by the freeway?
Oh, that's Heritage Park or Heritage Square.
Heritage Square. That's right.
Yeah, I think technically that's not Highland Park. It's like just on the outside of the border of it.
Yeah.
But I'm like, dude, that whole thing used to be like one big rancho. Like, so people just try to like.
Yeah, it's Highland Park.
It's Highland Park.
That I just remember we would get on the freeway. I want to say my mom would jump on the freeway to take my brother to Egrok, so she would get off like soon when we would get on, and we would pass it. And I would always, because they weren't like all fixed up yet.
Yeah.
So I would remember feeling like spooked out because they looked so scary.
Yeah. No, yeah, definitely. Like something, if you believe in that kind of stuff, something that old has to have some like spirits hanging around. I actually had friends that got married there.
What?
It was pretty cool my wife and I were the officiants. So we married them.
Nice.
So it was pretty cool. And they had their ceremony there, and then the reception. So it's a pretty cool place to like hang out. And,
do you know the history of like why those houses are there?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, they used a lot. Some of those their old Victorian homes. They moved them. I want to say even some of them came from like Bunker Hill in like downtown LA.
Really?
And so they moved them there because they were gonna just tear them down and just get rid of them. So I think they moved some houses from different parts of the city, and they basically just put them there. And they're like, we'll figure out what to do with them later, you know. And then it just became a thing. So now it's like, you know, like now there's, I forget, it's like 6 or 8 houses from like the Victorian period, like the, you know, the turn of the century.
Right.
And you know, there's like a house that used to be like a doctor's house, and there's like, you know, so things like that. And when you go there, if you get a tour, you can go inside of like, I think if you just go there on a regular day, you can just see the outside, but if you go like on a tour, you can actually go inside the houses. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It does cost money to go on the tour.
Yeah.
I remember I tried to go and I was like, how much?
Yeah. No, I mean, that's the thing too, is a lot of these places, you know,
yeah, they need funding.
They need the funding. So
yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So, where can we find you?
Yeah. So you can go to my website is foohowser.com.
Okay.
So it's FOO and then Howser, HOWSER.com. And, you know, I like post every time I do a video, I post like a little write up about it there. You can find all my links there. If you Google Foo Howser, you should find it. My page is called Californiography, because, you know, talking about California and then writing it down like a biography, Californiography. But if you just go to foohowser.com, you should be able to find everything there.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much for doing this. Also, wait, just before we end, actually, what is the story? Well, you kind of already explained it, but I think I heard you say something else on Gil's episode about you picking up on the name Foo Howser.
Yeah, so I did a video about all the Bertos, whether it's, you know, Robertos, Albertos, all that kind of stuff. And I did a video on that, and then it got shared by Little Rob, the rapper, and then Fool's Gone Wild picked it up. So it like went viral, and somebody in the comments was like, "Oh, this dude's Foo Howser," and I was like, "Oh, dude, I gotta run with that." Like I said, like I grew up in HP. I grew up, you know, like Highland Park too. You know, you grew up around, you know, homies, actually, you know, homies and Foos. You know, Foos, and you know, you know, and then your friends, you call each other the same thing. You know, you pick up on all that. Yeah. And so I was like, you know, for me, I'm like, it's perfect. Foo represents, you know, how I grew up, and then Howser is for, you know, for Hugh Howser. So I combine the two. It's like I'm Foo Howser. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. Well, thank you again for doing this. Absolutely. We'll close out now.